It was one of those mornings where the world seemed to hit pause. The kind of day that made you want to stay under the covers just a little longer, sipping something warm and watching the rain paint patterns on your window pane. In a small coastal town tucked between rolling hills and the endless stretch of ocean, lived a woman in her early 30s who had always found comfort in rainy days. She wasn't particularly outgoing, more the type to observe life quietly from the sidelines. But there was something about the rhythm of falling raindrops that felt like an old friend calling out. Her apartment was simple, but cozy, filled with books stacked neatly on shelves, a worn-out armchair by the window, and a coffee maker that rarely got a break. On this particular morning, she woke up to the soft pitter-patter of rain against the glass. It wasn't loud enough to be annoying, but steady enough to make everything feel calm and still. As she shuffled to the kitchen, wrapping herself in her oversized sweater, she thought about how these kinds of days used to go when she was younger. Back then, rainy afternoons meant curling up with a good book or listening to her grandmother's old piano records, the ones with scratchy static at the beginning but rich, soulful melodies once they started playing. She poured herself a steaming cup of coffee, adding just a splash of milk because that's how she liked it best. Then, mug in hand, she settled into her favorite spot by the window. Outside, the streets glistened with puddles reflecting the grey sky, and people hurried past, clutching umbrellas like shields against the drizzle. But inside, it was peaceful, a perfect bubble of warmth and quiet. Sipping her coffee slowly, she let her mind wander. That's when an idea popped into her head. What if today could be different? Instead of letting the hours slip away unnoticed, why not fully embrace the mood of the rain? She remembered how much she loved piano music, the way it could match any emotion, whether it was sadness, nostalgia, or even joy. Maybe she could spend the day listening to some rainy day piano tunes while enjoying her coffee. After all, what better company could there be for a gloomy afternoon than music that spoke directly to the soul? With that thought, she grabbed her phone, opened Spotify, and typed in "rainy day piano." Almost instantly, gentle notes began filling the room, wrapping around her like a soft blanket. Each melody carried its own story, pulling her deeper into memories she hadn't thought about in years. There was something magical about how music could do that, transport you to another time without saying a word. For the first time in ages, she felt completely present, as though the rain, the coffee, and the music were conspiring together to remind her of something important. Something she couldn't quite put her finger on yet, but it was there, lingering just beneath the surface. As the music played, each note seemed to stir something deep inside her. The gentle melodies weren't just background noise. They were unlocking memories she'd tucked away long ago. She remembered how, as a teenager, she used to sit at the piano for hours, practicing until her fingers ached. Her teacher had called her talented, but talent alone wasn't enough to keep her going. Life had other plans, and slowly the piano became less of a priority. College deadlines, part-time jobs, and adult responsibilities took over, leaving little room for the thing that once brought her so much joy. The piano in the corner of her living room was proof of that. It had been a gift from her grandmother, who always said, "Music is the language of the heart." But over time, dust settled on its keys, and it turned into more of a decoration than an instrument. She hadn't touched it in years, not since moving into this apartment. Yet now, sitting there with her coffee, listening to these soulful tunes, she felt a strange pull toward it. It was like the music was whispering to her, urging her to reconnect with the person she used to be. She glanced over at the piano, half hidden, behind a stack of magazines and a potted plant. For a moment, she considered getting up and trying to play something, anything, but doubt crept in. What if she couldn't remember how? What if the magic wasn't there anymore? Those questions lingered, making her hesitate. Still, the idea wouldn't leave her mind. Maybe it wasn't about being perfect or even good. Maybe it was just about letting herself feel again, the way she did when she was younger. Her thoughts drifted back to those afternoons spent learning Chopin and Debussy. She recalled how every piece had its own personality, some soft and dreamy, others bold and dramatic. Playing them had been like having conversations without words. And then there were the moments when everything clicked. Her hands moved effortlessly across the keys, and for a few precious minutes, nothing else mattered. That feeling was what she missed most, not the applause or recognition, but the pure, unfiltered connection to something bigger than herself. But life doesn't always let you hold on to things forever. Somewhere along the way, she stopped making time for the piano. Work became demanding, relationships came and went, and hobbies fell by the wayside. Now, here she was, rediscovering something she thought she'd lost. Listening to the Rainy Day playlist made her realize how much she craved that sense of purpose, that spark of creativity she used to take for granted. By the time the third song ended, she found herself standing up, drawn almost magnetically toward the piano. Her heart raced as she brushed the dust off the keys, revealing their smooth, polished surface beneath. Sitting down, she hesitated, staring at the ivory and ebony notes like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Could she still do this? Did she even want to try? The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, as if encouraging her to take the first step. Taking a deep breath, she placed her fingers lightly on the keys and pressed down. The sound was hesitant at first, a shaky chord that wobbled slightly, but it was enough to make her smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Something about hearing those notes, however imperfect, stirred a warmth in her chest. Maybe the piano wasn't lost to her after all. Maybe it was waiting patiently for her to come back, just like the rain had returned to wash away the dry spell. The rain showed no signs of stopping, and neither did the pull she felt towards stepping outside her usual routine. By mid-afternoon, the cozy warmth of her apartment started to feel a little too quiet, a little too predictable. She decided it was time for a change of scenery. Wrapping herself in a light jacket, she grabbed her umbrella and headed out into the drizzle, the sound of piano music still lingering in her mind. The streets were damp, the air smelled earthy, and the world seemed softer somehow, like the rain had blurred all its sharp edges. Her destination was a small cafe just 2 blocks away, a place she visited often but never really thought much about. It wasn't fancy, just a snug little spot with mismatched chairs, wooden tables, and the smell of freshly baked pastries wafting through the air. What made it special was the big glass windows that looked out onto the street, perfect for watching the rain while sipping something warm. Today, though, as she pushed open the door and stepped inside, she noticed someone sitting alone near the window who caught her attention immediately. He was sketching in a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked. Every now and then, he'd glance up at the rain-soaked street outside, almost like he was drawing inspiration from the weather. There was something about him. Maybe it was the way he tapped his pen rhythmically against the edge of the table, or how he occasionally drummed his fingers on the surface, that reminded her of music. He didn't seem to notice her staring at first, but when he finally did, their eyes met briefly before she quickly looked away, embarrassed. Still, curiosity got the better of her. After ordering her usual coffee and snagging a seat nearby, she couldn't help but sneak another glance. His sketches intrigued her. They weren't just random doodles. They were detailed line drawings of the rainy streetscape, capturing the reflections in puddles and the silhouettes of people passing by. Something about them felt alive, as if he'd managed to bottle the essence of the moment and pour it onto paper. She wondered what kind of person could create something so thoughtful, so full of quiet observation. Eventually, she mustered the courage to approach him. Clutching her coffee cup like a shield, she walked over and said, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice your sketches. They're really beautiful." Her voice came out softer than she intended, tinged with nervousness, but he looked up and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that instantly put her at ease. "Thanks," he replied, setting his pen down. "I've always found rainy days inspiring. There's something about the way everything slows down. It gives you space to notice the little things." They started talking, and it turned out he was just as interested in her story as she was in his. When she mentioned her rediscovery of piano music earlier that day, his eyes lit up. "That's amazing," he said. "Music and art, they're kind of the same thing, aren't they? Both are ways of expressing what words can't." As they chatted, she learned that he spent most of his days writing, composing, or sketching, depending on where his mood took him. He admitted he didn't have a traditional job, which explained why he was free to sit in a cafe on a rainy afternoon. But there was a sincerity in the way he spoke, a passion for creating that resonated with her. For the first time in ages, she felt like she was having a conversation that truly mattered, one that left her thinking long after their cups were empty and the rain continued to fall outside. The next day, the rain was still falling, steady and unrelenting, as if it had no plans of stopping anytime soon. She woke up feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The memory of yesterday's conversation at the cafe lingering in her mind, like a pleasant tune you can't quite shake off. There was something about the way he spoke, his calm, thoughtful demeanor, that made her want to see him again. So, after another quiet morning spent sipping coffee and listening to piano melodies, she decided to head back to the cafe, half hoping he'd be there. When she walked in, sure enough, he was sitting, in the same spot by the window, though this time he wasn't sketching. Instead, he was writing in a leather-bound notebook, his pen moving quickly across the page. He looked up as she approached, and when their eyes met, he gave her that same warm smile from the day before. "I thought I might see you here," he said, gesturing toward the empty seat across from him. She hesitated for only a moment before sitting down, suddenly grateful she'd come. They picked up right where they'd left off, talking about everything and nothing all at once. She told him more about her rediscovery of piano music, the way it had stirred old memories and sparked a longing to reconnect with something she'd loved so deeply years ago. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, his expression thoughtful. When she confessed how nervous she felt about trying to play again, he didn't laugh or dismiss her concerns. Instead, he leaned forward slightly and said, "You know, sometimes we think we've lost something forever, but really it's just waiting for us to find it again." His words struck a chord within her, and she found herself opening up even more. For the first time in years, she admitted out loud how much she missed playing. Not just the act of pressing keys, but the way it used to make her feel. It was like having a secret language, one that allowed her to express emotions she couldn't put into words. Listening to her, he nodded knowingly, as if he understood exactly what she meant, and maybe he did. After all, he seemed to live his life through creative pursuits, whether it was composing music, sketching scenes, or jotting down thoughts in his notebook. As their conversation deepened, she learned more about him too. Afi explained that he wrote music inspired by moments like these. Rainy days, quiet cafes, fleeting interactions with strangers. "It's all about capturing the mood," he said, tapping his pen lightly on the table. "Sometimes it's the simplest, things that inspire the most powerful pieces." Hearing him talk about his process fascinated her. She realized how similar their passions were, even if they expressed them differently. While she connected with structured notes and melodies, he thrived on spontaneity and raw emotion. Before leaving, he surprised her by offering to lend her some sheet music he'd written specifically for beginners. "It's nothing fancy," he said with a shrug, "but it might help you ease back into things without feeling overwhelmed." She accepted gratefully, touched by his generosity. As they said goodbye, promising to meet again soon, she felt a flicker of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Maybe this rainy season wouldn't just be about nostalgia. It could also be the start of something new. Over the next few days, she began practicing the pieces he'd given her, starting slowly and cautiously. Each note felt like a tiny victory, a step closer to reclaiming a part of herself she'd almost forgotten. Meanwhile, their conversations continued, growing deeper and more meaningful with each meeting. They talked about dreams, fears, and the beauty of imperfection, finding comfort in the shared understanding that life is messy but worth exploring anyway. With every passing day, the rain-soaked streets outside became less lonely and more alive, mirroring the growing connection between two people brought together by art, music, and the magic of a rainy day. The rainy days kept coming, one after another, as if the sky itself was conspiring to keep this newfound rhythm alive. Each morning, she woke up with a sense of anticipation, eager to see how far she could push herself that day. The sheet music he'd given her became her guide, a gentle hand pulling her back into the world of melodies she'd once called home. At first, it was frustrating. Her fingers stumbled over the keys, and some notes came out flat or uneven, but she didn't let it discourage her. Instead, she reminded herself why she was doing this, not for perfection, but for the joy of rediscovery. Every few days, they met at the cafe, and their conversations grew richer with each visit. She started bringing updates on her progress, sometimes even playing snippets of the pieces on her phone so he could hear them. He listened carefully, offering tips and encouragement without ever making her feel like she wasn't good enough. "You're doing great," he'd say with a smile. It's all about finding your own voice again. His belief in her made her want to try harder, to prove to herself that she hadn't lost the spark entirely. One afternoon, as they sat sipping coffee by the window, he mentioned an upcoming event, a small recital he was hosting at a local community center. It wasn't anything formal, just a cozy gathering where people could enjoy live music while sipping tea or coffee. As he described it, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. When he casually suggested she might join him on stage, her heart skipped a beat. "What? No, I couldn't," she stammered, shaking her head. "I'm not ready for something like that." But he didn't let her brush it off so easily. "Why not?" he asked gently. "You don't have to play a complicated piece. Just something simple, something that feels right to you. Besides," he added with a playful grin, "it'll give you a reason to practice even harder." His words stuck with her long after they parted ways that day. For the next couple of weeks, she threw herself into practicing with a new sense of purpose. Every evening, she sat at the piano, determined to make the music flow smoothly. Slowly but surely, her confidence began to grow. Her fingers moved more naturally across the keys, and the hesitant chords turned into fluid melodies. By the time the day of the recital arrived, she was both terrified and exhilarated, unsure whether she was ready, but knowing deep down that she wanted to try. The community center was warm and inviting, filled with the hum of quiet chatter and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. People milled about, holding cups in hand, chatting softly as they waited for the performance to begin. She stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the strap of her bag. He noticed her anxiety immediately and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this," he whispered. "Just focus on the music, not the audience." When it was finally her turn, she walked onto the small stage, feeling every pair of eyes in the room settle on her. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. But then she sat down at the piano, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. The moment the first note rang out, everything else faded away. The nerves, the crowd, the pressure. All that remained was the music, flowing through her like a river breaking free from its banks. Together, they performed a duet he had composed especially for the occasion. His part was soft and understated, weaving seamlessly with hers, which was delicate yet full of emotion. The audience sat spellbound, completely absorbed in the haunting beauty of the piece. When the final note lingered in the air, there was a brief pause before applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and appreciation. As she stood up to take a bow alongside him, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, not just for the support of the audience, but for the journey that had brought her here. That night, walking home under the still falling rain, she realized something profound. Rediscovering her love for music wasn't just about reconnecting with the past. It was also about embracing the present, finding courage in vulnerability, and allowing herself to be inspired by the people and moments life brought her way. The recital marked a turning point, not just for her relationship with music, but also for the bond she shared with the person who had encouraged her to step back into this world. After that night, things between them felt different, lighter, more connected. They started spending even more time together, blending their creative energies in ways neither of them had expected. He introduced her to new techniques for composing music, showing her how to capture emotions in melodies without overthinking it. In return, she brought structure and discipline to his often spontaneous approach, helping him refine ideas he'd been hesitant to finish. Their shared passion became the foundation of something deeper, a partnership built on mutual respect and admiration. It wasn't just about music anymore, it was about creating something meaningful together. They began collaborating on projects, combining her classical training with his modern flair. Sometimes they worked late into the night, surrounded by scattered sheets of paper covered in notes and lyrics. Other times, they sat side by side at the piano, experimenting until they stumbled upon something beautiful. Each piece they created carried a piece of both of them, like a snapshot of their journey. On weekends, they started hosting small concerts in cozy venues around town. These weren't grand performances meant to impress crowds. They were intimate, gatherings where people came not just to listen, but to feel. The audience would sit close, cradling cups of coffee or tea, as the two of them played soft, heartfelt melodies inspired by rainy days, quiet moments, and the beauty of everyday life. Between songs, they'd share stories about how each piece came to be, making the experience personal and relatable. People loved it, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Word spread quickly about these little concerts, and soon, the turnout grew from a handful of friends to larger groups of strangers who simply wanted to escape the noise of daily life. For her, it was surreal to see how far she'd come, from hesitating to press a single key to performing in front of an attentive crowd. But what amazed her most was how much joy it brought her. She realized that playing the piano wasn't just about skill or technique. It was about connection. Every note she played reached someone, whether it reminded them of a memory, stirred an emotion, or simply gave them a moment of peace. Beyond the concerts, she found herself drawn back to teaching. Remembering how much her own teacher had inspired her as a child, she decided to offer lessons to kids in the neighborhood. At first, she worried she wouldn't be good at it, that she might intimidate them or fail to make learning fun. But to her surprise, the opposite happened. The children responded to her warmth and patience, and watching their faces light up when they mastered a tricky section filled her with pride. Teaching reignited her love for the technical side of music, reminding her of the importance of discipline, alongside creativity. Meanwhile, he continued to write and compose, often incorporating elements of her feedback into his work. Their collaboration pushed both of them out of their comfort zones, leading to unexpected breakthroughs. One evening, while working on a particularly challenging piece, he turned to her and said, "You know, I think we're better together than we ever were apart." She smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. Their differences complemented each other perfectly, creating a balance that fueled their growth. As the months went by, their lives intertwined more deeply. They spent rainy afternoons sketching ideas for future projects, laughed over failed attempts at cooking dinner, and supported each other through moments of doubt. Music remained the thread tying everything together, but it was clear now that their connection went beyond art. Together, they had built a life rooted in creativity, trust, and shared dreams. And every time the rain fell, she couldn't help but smile, knowing it carried the soundtrack of their story, a melody written in imperfect notes but filled with endless possibility. As the seasons changed, so did their lives, but the rain remained a constant, always finding its way back to remind them of where it all began. What had started as a quiet rediscovery of music and creativity had blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted. Their weekends were no longer just about cozy mornings or solitary cups of coffee. They were filled with shared laughter, late-night jam sessions, and planning for the next community concert. The small coastal town that once seemed sleepy now felt alive, humming with the energy of people coming together to celebrate art in its purest form. Their concerts became more than performances, they turned into rituals. Regular attendees would show up early, claiming their favorite spots near the stage, eager to hear what new melodies awaited them. Some brought friends, others came alone, but everyone left feeling lighter, like the music had washed away some invisible weight. For her, these gatherings were a reminder of why she'd fallen in love with piano in the first place. It wasn't about impressing anyone or chasing perfection. It was about creating moments of connection, even if fleeting, that lingered long after the final note faded. Teaching also became a cornerstone of her life, filling her days with purpose. Watching children struggle through their first scales, only to beam with pride when they finally nailed a simple melody reminded her of her own journey. She saw herself in them. The hesitations, the breakthroughs, the pure joy of discovery. And while she guided them technically, she also encouraged them to let go of fear and play from the heart. Music isn't about being perfect, she'd tell them. It's about telling your story. For him, collaborating with her opened doors he hadn't known existed. Her structured approach balanced his free-spirited style, and together they crafted pieces that resonated deeply with listeners. They started recording some of their compositions, sharing them online for anyone who needed a bit of rainy day comfort. To their surprise, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers saying how the music had helped them through tough times, or simply brightened an ordinary day. Knowing their work touched lives far beyond their little town made everything feel even more meaningful. But it wasn't just their creative pursuits that defined this chapter of their lives. Over time, their partnership grew stronger, rooted not just in shared passions but in everyday moments too. They learned to navigate disagreements, to lean on each other during hard days, and to celebrate the small victories. Whether it was figuring out how to fix a leaky faucet or deciding which piece to perform next, they faced it all as a team. Rainy days still held a special place in their hearts, but now every kind of weather felt significant because they experienced it together. One evening, as they sat by the window watching another storm roll in, she looked over at him and said, "Do you remember that first day we met at the cafe?" He chuckled, nodding. "How could I forget? You walked up to me looking like you were about to ask for directions." She laughed, shaking her head. "I was nervous, but you made it easy to talk to you." There was a pause, and then she added softly, "I don't think I ever thanked you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." He reached over, taking her hand in his. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "All I did was point you toward something you already had inside you. The rest was all you." In that moment, surrounded by the sound of rain and the warmth of their shared history, she realized how much had changed since that grey morning months ago. Back then, she'd been searching for something without knowing exactly what it was. Now, she understood. It wasn't just music or creativity she'd been missing. It was connection. It was courage. It was learning to embrace imperfection and finding beauty in the unexpected. And so, as the rain continued to fall outside, she smiled, knowing that life, much like music, was unpredictable and all the more beautiful for it.